I had exactly $412,870 left in the joint operating account when my brother tried to lock me out of the company my mother had built, and I was reading the email on my phone from a hospital recliner with a compression sleeve on my left arm and fresh stitches under my blouse from a mastectomy I had not even told most people about. Attached to the email was a PDF I had never seen, a so-called emergency board resolution bearing my name in shaky digital script, authorizing a transfer of control to a new LLC I had never approved. 20 minutes later, a courier arrived at my condo in downtown Charlotte with a padded envelope containing a silver USB drive and no return address. I dropped it once because pain medication makes my hands clumsy, and I remember being annoyed at myself for that. By the end of the week, I would learn 3 things. The signature had been staged, the meeting had never happened, and the person who saved me was someone my brother had dismissed as invisible for years. 2 months later, at a public donor gala with a string quartet playing under rented chandeliers, he would stand in front of 200 people and realize the fraud carve-out and our mother's trust applied to him. Let me take you back. My name is Evelyn Mercer. I was 48 years old, a licensed CPA by training, and for 16 years I had been the one quietly keeping Mercer Community Homes alive while my younger brother, Graham, gave interviews, shook hands, and let people believe charisma was a business model. We were based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and on paper we were a development company that specialized in mixed-income senior housing. In practice, we were our mother's life's work. She started it after our father left, with one duplex, a yellow legal pad, and the kind of stubbornness that made bank officers sit up straighter. I was the numbers. Graham was the face. That was the arrangement people admired from a distance and misunderstood up close. If you asked my mother, she would have told you I was the one who finishes things. If you asked Graham, he would have smiled and called me cautious, which was his polite word for useful. There is always a golden child and a workhorse in families like ours. The golden child gets forgiven for being late because he is creative. The workhorse gets questioned for leaving at 6 because no one notices she arrived at 7. The first time I understood the difference, I was 14. Our mother had given us both summer jobs clearing debris from a rehab site in Gastonia. Graham disappeared for half the afternoon with friends and came back with a soda and a grin. My mother saw him, looked at me sweating through a dust mask, and said, "Evelyn, be the bigger person." She meant, finish the job. I did. Graham told that story for years as proof that I liked being in charge. The second time was much later, after our first major city contract. We were at a planning dinner with lenders and council staff. I had built the underwriting model Graham was presenting. One banker turned to him and said, "You're lucky to have someone like your sister handling the back office." Graham smiled and answered, "She'd kill me if I touched a spreadsheet." Everyone laughed. I did too. Then I went to the restroom, locked the stall, and stood there looking at my own shoes because I did not trust my face. That is how dehumanization happens in respectable rooms. No one calls you names. They simply reduce you to a function. When our mother died, the will surprised everyone except me because I had helped her organize the exhibits, though I had not seen the final trust terms. She split the business evenly in economic value, but not in control. Day-to-day operations remained with whichever child the independent trustee believed was actually safeguarding the company's mission. At the time, that was both comforting and vague. Then last spring I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. Treatable, good prognosis, terrible timing. I had surgery in April and kept working through pre-op appointments, because of course I did. I let the board know I'd be out 2 weeks. Graham suggested, with an expression arranged to look brotherly, that he should temporarily consolidate authority so decisions could move faster. I said no. He asked again. I still said no. 3 days after surgery, he sent the email. The subject line was governance transition. The body read like it had been composed by someone trying to sound formal enough to outrun the truth. It referenced an emergency vote, an affidavit from outside counsel, and an interim transfer of managerial control to Mercer Strategic Holdings LLC pending my recovery. There was a sentence near the end that made my pulse go cold. If you miss this, you lose everything. That sentence referred to a 72-hour deadline to contest the filing before the bank updated authorized signatories and our largest vendor paused credit. It was not just a threat. It was a clock. I called our general counsel, Daniel Rivas, from the recliner before I even opened the attachment. He answered on the first ring. Evelyn, I need you to tell me there was no board meeting. A pause. Keyboard sounds. Then, there was no scheduled board meeting. Send me everything. Right now. The PDF was a board consent packet. My signature was there, leaning slightly uphill the way mine never did. There was also a notarized page. That part was almost clever. People relax when they see a seal. Daniel called back 8 minutes later. This isn't just aggressive, he said. If that signature is fake, we're into fraud. I need the original metadata on the PDF. Do not forward it again. Preserve the email header. I remember looking at the USB drive on my coffee table then. It sat there small and metallic and quiet, like it already knew something. The courier envelope had no note, just the drive. I plugged it into my laptop. Inside were 2 folders. The first contained screenshots of our company's cloud calendar showing no board meeting had ever been created, canceled, or rescheduled. Useful, but not decisive. The second folder held exported security logs from our office suite, plus a short video clip from the reception camera dated the afternoon Graham claimed the emergency meeting took place. The conference room stayed dark the entire day. No directors entered. No notary. No meeting. The second folder changed everything. I did not know, yet, who had sent it. Daniel brought in a forensic IT consultant named Priya Shah that same afternoon. She joined our call from a glass-walled office and spoke with the kind of calm that makes panic feel embarrassing. Metadata first, she said. Every file tells on itself if it hasn't been handled carefully. She explained it in plain English because legal language is expensive and panic is stupid. The PDF's creation trail showed it had been assembled at 1:14 a.m. from 3 separate source files. The digital signature block bearing my name had been imported from a prior vendor approval packet. The notary stamp had been copied from an unrelated affidavit filed 6 months earlier. The document properties also showed the creator account, graham.mercer@mercerhomes.co. Daniel was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Good. That matters." I asked him, "Good for what?" "For an injunction, for an asset freeze if he moved money, for removing him under the trust fraud carve-out if the trustee has a spine, and for making sure he never says this was a misunderstanding." "This isn't revenge," I said. My throat was dry. "This is justice." Daniel did not smile. "Exactly. The next problem was practical. Graham had already contacted First Carolina Bank and 2 vendors. He was moving fast because speed is often the entire plan. If you create enough confusion, people treat facts like opinions. By evening, we had filed a temporary restraining order in Mecklenburg County to stop any transfer of authority. Daniel explained each piece as we moved. An affidavit from me, sworn under penalty of perjury, stating no meeting occurred. A forensic declaration from Priya explaining the metadata. A request for expedited relief because payroll and resident services were at risk. The law sounds sterile when you list it, but in the room it felt personal. Every term meant something tangible. Injunction meant employees wouldn't wake up to bounce paychecks. Asset freeze meant he couldn't sweep money into the LLC. Fraud carve-out meant our mother had anticipated the possibility that charm and entitlement might one day turn predatory. I slept badly that night. Around 3 a.m., I got a text from Graham. "You're overreacting. I'm trying to protect the company while you're sick." There are messages so transparent they insult you twice. First by what they say, then by what they assume you will accept. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. The next morning, the anonymous sender revealed herself without intending to. Her name was Marisol Vega, and she had worked our front desk for 9 years. Everyone loved her. Graham never learned her son's name. She called my cell at 9:12. "Ms. Mercer," she said, voice shaking, "I don't know if I did the right thing. You sent the drive." A long pause. I thought if I used my email, he'd know. Marisol told me she had been asked, the Friday before my surgery, to let a notary into the office after hours. Only the notary never arrived. Instead, Graham and his wife, Tessa, used the conference room printer, then asked Marisol to update the visitor log later because they were handling something sensitive. She thought it was odd. When she reviewed the security dashboard on Monday to help IT with an unrelated lock issue, she realized the office had been nearly empty the day of the supposed meeting. She exported what she could because, in her words, "Your mama was always decent to me, and this felt dirty." There was the ally identity twist right there, though at the time it did not feel like a twist. It felt like a correction. The person Graham counted as background had become the witness he could not explain away. Daniel took Marisol's statement that afternoon. We added it to the filing. Graham escalated on cue. People like him usually do when paper starts replacing conversation. He sent a company-wide email saying he was stabilizing leadership during a family health emergency. He scheduled a donor appreciation gala for our foundation, ostensibly to reassure partners. In reality, it was a stage. If he could be seen publicly as in charge before the court hearing, he thought perception would do half his work for him. He also called me directly for the first time since the email. Evie, he said, using the childhood nickname he only pulled out when he wanted access to my boundaries. I hate that Daniel is turning this into a legal circus. I'm sorry, I said. Which part was not legal? The forged signature or the fake meeting? A breath. Then cooler. You always do this. You make process more important than family. No, I said. I make reality more important than your version of it. He sighed like I was exhausting. You're on pain meds. You're emotional. Let me get us through the next quarter and we can revisit all of this. That was Graham's calm cruelty. He never shouted. He revised your condition until resistance sounded unreasonable. The hearing for temporary relief was set for the Tuesday after the gala. Daniel wanted to avoid a circus. I wanted the same thing. But our independent trustee, Helen Baines, asked us to attend the gala anyway because several institutional donors would be there, and she wanted to observe Graham in a room where he thought he was safe. Helen was 72, sharp as broken glass, and had once run a regional bank. My mother chose her because she did not confuse sentiment with judgment. When Daniel explained the fraud carve-out to me in full, it finally became specific. If either beneficiary engaged in material deception, forgery, or diversion of company assets related to the trust corpus, the trustee could suspend governance rights pending court review and permanently reduce that beneficiary's inheritance if the conduct threatened the enterprise. My mother had not been vague after all. She had just been patient. The gala was held at the Mint Museum uptown, black jackets, donor name tags, polished floors reflecting candlelight. I wore a navy dress that hid the tenderness near my left side and low heels because I still got tired faster than I admitted. Daniel stood near the back with Helen. Priya attended too, not as a speaker, but as an observer in case anyone said something interesting. Marisol was nowhere visible. That was deliberate. Graham took the stage at 8:10. Tessa stood to one side in a silver gown, hands folded like she was attending a recital. He thanked donors, praised our mission, and spoke movingly about resilience during unexpected transitions. Then he did something I had hoped he would be too disciplined to do. He announced a new era of streamlined leadership. A few people clapped politely. He continued, "My sister Evelyn has been courageous during her health challenges, and she'll always have a place in the Mercer story. But the board has empowered me to move the organization forward. Dramatic irony is a clean, almost holy thing when the liar does your pacing for you." Helen rose first. She did not hurry. "That statement is inaccurate," she said, and because she had spent 40 years in rooms where people listened, the room listened. Graham blinked. "Helen, perhaps we should discuss governance privately." "No," she said. "You've made it public." Daniel stepped beside her. For clarity, no valid board authorization transferred control to Mr. Mercer. We have already filed for injunctive relief based on evidence of document fabrication. A murmur moved through the room, small and then larger. Graham recovered enough to smile. "That is a misunderstanding involving draft materials." Then Priya spoke from 2 rows back, still seated. "Metadata isn't a misunderstanding." He turned toward the voice. "Wrong move." It made him look hunted. Helen asked, "Would you like me to read the trust provision, Graham, or do you remember the fraud carve-out?" That was the bigger reveal. The nuclear one arrived 30 seconds later, and it came from someone Graham had not even clocked all evening. Marisol stood from the side aisle in a plain black dress, no name tag, invited personally by Helen. "I was at the office," she said, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. "There was no meeting, and you asked me to alter the visitor log." The room went still in that peculiar public way where silence becomes evidence. Graham looked at Tessa. Tessa looked at the floor. He started to speak. Daniel raised a hand. "Don't," he said. "Not here." Graham left the stage without another word. Tessa followed 3 steps behind him, still elegant, suddenly small. No one shouted. No one needed to. Wealthy donors are not the loudest audience, but they understand governance, and they understand fear. What Graham lost in that room was not just face. It was institutional confidence. The courtroom went silent 2 days later for a different reason. Judge Elaine Porter had read everything before taking the bench, which I appreciated immediately because it saved us theater. Daniel presented the timeline. Priya explained the metadata with patient precision. Source files, timestamps, imported signature block, creator account, mismatch between claim notarization and office access records. Marisol testified simply. Graham's attorney tried to suggest the packet was an internal draft mistakenly transmitted as final, but that argument collapsed when Daniel introduced bank emails showing Graham had already used the packet to seek authority changes. Then came the part one had not expected to hurt. Under questioning, Graham said, "My sister hasn't been fully capable during treatment. There are lies that are strategic and lies that reveal the whole person." That was the second kind. Daniel did not rise right away. He waited, then introduced my post-surgery work logs, my physician's letter confirming I was competent, and a chain of emails in which Graham had thanked me for revising lender covenants while I was supposedly too impaired to understand governance. He did not humiliate Graham. He arranged him. Judge Porter granted the temporary restraining order from the bench, froze any attempted transfer tied to Mercer Strategic Holdings LLC, and ordered expedited discovery on the forgery claim. She also referred the signature issue for further review. Her exact wording was measured, but the meaning was plain. The court did not appreciate fabricated documents. Outside the courthouse, Helen informed Graham that under the trust fraud carve-out, she was suspending all his governance rights pending final adjudication. He laughed once, sharply, and said, "Mother would never have wanted this." Helen looked at him for a long moment. "Your mother drafted it. There is a kind of justice in being defeated by a clause written years before you thought to misbehave." Discovery was ugly in the unglamorous way white-collar messes usually are. No car chases, no hidden rooms, just bank records, email chains, LLC registration documents, and invoices that tell stories nobody wants told. Mercer Strategic Holdings had been formed 6 weeks before my surgery, not after. Tessa's cousin had billed for the operating agreement. A notary stamp had been lifted from an old scanned affidavit in our legal folder. Graham had told 2 vendors I had voluntarily stepped down for health reasons. He had also drafted a memo positioning himself for a compensation increase once the transition was complete. He settled before trial. The settlement terms were clean and devastating. Graham resigned from all roles, surrendered governance claims, and sold back part of his economic interest at a court-supervised discount based on misconduct risk and litigation exposure. No ruin, no cruelty, just consequence. He was barred from representing the company, from contacting specific vendors on our behalf, and from accessing company systems. The LLC was dissolved. The forged materials were withdrawn. The court retained jurisdiction to enforce the agreement. Tessa filed for divorce 8 months later. I did not celebrate that. People's private wreckage is not a trophy. 1 year later, I was back at work full-time, with shorter days on Fridays because recovery teaches you that martyrdom is a bad management style. Mercer Community Homes had closed financing on a new senior housing project in Concord. Marisol was our operations coordinator now, with a raise, actual authority, and a nameplate that spelled her name correctly because details matter. Priya still consulted for us on cybersecurity and document controls. Daniel still sent me contracts with yellow sticky notes that said things like "do not be reasonable too soon." Graham had moved to Atlanta and was doing some kind of commercial brokerage work, which sounded exactly like the sort of job that rewards confidence untethered from memory. We did not speak. The world did not end because of that. What surprised me was not the legal win. It was the emotional cleanup afterward. For months, I kept expecting vindication to feel louder. It didn't. It felt organized. Payroll went out on time. Residents never knew how close we had come to a governance disaster. I slept better. My left arm stopped aching in the rain. Sometimes justice is not a speech. Sometimes it is simply that the right people are still allowed to do their work. I keep one thing from that year in my desk, the silver USB drive. Not because I enjoy reminders, but because it tells the truth about power. The person who saved the company was not the loudest one in the room. She was the one paying attention when everyone else assumed she was furniture. If there is a lesson in any of this, it is not to become suspicious of everyone. It is to stop confusing love, family, or history with exemption from accountability. Boundaries are not disloyal. Documentation is not cold. Asking to see the operating agreement, the affidavit, the escrow instructions, the trust language, the signatures, the metadata, that is not paranoia. That is self-respect with a filing system. And if someone ever tries to rush you with urgency they created themselves, remember this: real authority can withstand review. Fraud always hates a deadline it did not set. So that is my story. I had a scar, a forged signature, a brother who mistook access for ownership, and a mother who planned further ahead than either of us knew. In the end, the company survived. I survived, and the people who counted on us never paid for his ambition. Tell me in the comments, if someone you trusted used family as cover for a financial betrayal, would you confront them privately first, or let the evidence speak in public? And subscribe if you want more stories where the receipts stay calm and the consequences do the talking.